Hey everybody, welcome to the Unfolding Restoration. My name is Anthony Sweat. I'm so excited in this video to talk to you today about the different First Vision accounts that exist, that give us the details behind this wonderful vision, perhaps, by the way, the most well-documented vision of deity that is found on earth. It's a wonderful thing to have so many accounts. I wish we had even more. So the purpose of this video is to talk about where those accounts come from, why they matter, what each of them say that's unique, and why they bless our life to know about them. So one of the first questions people ask is, why are there different accounts? And why do some of the accounts highlight different details? It's a wonderful question. It's an important question to ask. Let me just kick off by relating a story. One time I was in front of a large group of people, and somebody raised their hand and they said, where did you and your wife meet? And I said, oh, we grew up together, and then when I got off my mission, we hit it off and got married. Well, afterward, my wife said to me, that was the lamest version of our love story that I've ever heard you give. And I said to her, yeah, it was pretty lame, but I don't think they were asking about our love story. They asked where we met and how we got married. And now I said, now if somebody had come on to me in private, or a younger adult or something, and if they said, now, how did you know that your wife was the right one for you? Well, then I would have told some different stories, or I would have gone into different details. The context matters. The purpose matters. Our audience matters when we tell stories. So with the 9 accounts of the First Vision, they're all at different times. They're all in different contexts and different audiences with some different purposes. And that's what I want to talk about with you that's interesting to look at. So there's 3 different reasons that I'd have you focus in on why there's different accounts of the First Vision. The first one has to do with audience or context. Who is Joseph talking to? And what's going on? The second is purpose or content. Why is he saying what he's saying? Because when we have a certain point, we emphasize different content. The third one is simply memory or interpretation. As I've touched on in a previous video, as time goes on, we interpret events differently. Now, sometimes that giving it time gives us clarity to see things more clearly. At other times, it causes us to confound the past a little bit. Scholar Steve Harper, who's probably looked into the memory of Joseph Smith and the idea of memory as closely as anybody alive today with the First Vision, he says, quote, the First Vision accounts reveal that Joseph Smith consciously interpreted the experience and discovered meanings in it later that were not available to him when it occurred. Let me just give you one case in point. The 1838 account of the First Vision, it probably has the most language that deals with feeling persecuted or feeling attacked. Now, I don't think that's coincidental out of all the accounts, because what's going on in church history in 1838? Well, the church is being really heavily persecuted and attacked. We've just been driven out of Kirtland. A few years earlier, we were driven out of Independence, and in 1838, we will be completely driven out of the state of Missouri as a whole. So Joseph has on persecution lens and is remembering that might be forefront in his mind, the persecution that he experienced because of the vision. And that might not have been his frame of reference in 1835 or 1832 or 1842 when he gave another account. So memory also changes how we tell stories as a whole. Now, one thing, though, that I do want to emphasize, that the First Vision is very consistent. When you take all the accounts, there is a consistent story, a consistent narrative of a young boy who is confused about religion, who goes to the woods to pray, and who has a vision of God, and God directs him about which churches to join and why. That is consistent across all 9 accounts. If you take a look at this wonderful image here, that was published clear back in the Improvement era in 1970, taking a look at the different First Vision accounts, showing the different things that they mention, and the green dots are if that is mentioned in that account. You see consistency on a lot of points, even though there is some uniqueness on other accounts as a whole. Some people ask why Joseph didn't record the vision earlier, as though somehow that's a problem. They want to know why he didn't have the vision, and then go right home and write it in his journal, so to speak? Why did Joseph not record the first vision? The earliest account is 1832. I'm going to add a caveat, by the way. I actually think there's an earlier one. If you look in section 20 of the Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph drops a subtle hint to the first vision that if you understand what he's saying, you see that he's referencing the first vision, and that was in 1830. Well, why didn't he talk about it or record it until 1830 or 1832? There's some reasons to think about. It's likely that Joseph didn't fully understand the importance of this event until much later. It was a personal experience for him, this vision, this redemption from his sins, this direction. It's possible that it wasn't until the church was set up and going that he started to see the broader import for other people to learn about it. Also, Joseph was not known to keep a journal, by the way, and to write things down. It won't be until section 85 of the Doctrine and Covenants, when God commands Joseph to keep a regular history of the church, that Joseph very obediently goes out and buys a journal and starts to record his 1832 history of the church. His own mother said that Joseph was not given to reading and writing. He was given a lot to deep thinking as a whole. So maybe Joseph himself just wasn't somebody who wrote a lot. Also, maybe he did write it down, and that document just has yet to be discovered. That's not out of the realm of possibility either, as scholarship continues to happen. And if anybody has a problem with this, by the way, remember, it doesn't appear that Jesus ever wrote anything down himself and didn't record anything in his life. That doesn't mean that the resurrection, the atonement, the miracles, the Gospels didn't happen. All the Gospels were recorded later by other authors as a whole. So just some things to bear in mind when those questions are brought up about why Joseph didn't record the first vision prior to 1832 in detail. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about that 1832 account. I'm going to hit the four major accounts with you. There's an 1832, 35, 38, and 42 account. These accounts are ones that Joseph either produced or he oversaw their production. Therefore, they're known as the first-hand accounts of the first vision. This is the earliest known one, is 1832. It's written, the only one that we have in Joseph Smith's own handwriting. In this account, Joseph focuses more than anything on his quest to have his sins forgiven. There is this common campfire, second great awakening preaching that you have to find out if God has chosen you. Don't upset God. You know, what's the status of your soul? Are you saved? Do you know? Those questions seem to be burning and settling on Joseph. And he says in this account that he felt convicted because of his own sins, and that he wanted to know if his sins were forgiven. And that was one of the driving factors that took Joseph Smith to the grove. He says that he cried unto the Lord for mercy, for there was none else to whom I could go to obtain mercy. And the Lord heard my cry in the wilderness, while in the attitude of calling upon the Lord in the 16th year of my age. Now, that 16th year, some people look at it and say, oh, I thought he was 14. Well, by 16th year, he likely means he was 15 years old. And that was actually an insert added by Frederick G. Williams. So it's possible that maybe Joseph misremembered his age by 1 year, or that Frederick G. Williams misremembered Joseph's age of being 14 for 1 year. Again, one other part of the 1832 account that I love is that Joseph says that this question about his soul began to settle in on him when he was 12. Sometimes we tell the first vision story like, there was a young boy named Joseph who was confused over which church he should join. So he opened up James 1:5 that said, ask of God. So he put the book down and walked into a grove of trees and prayed, and God appeared to him. And he came back and he didn't even miss breakfast. While that condensed version might be helpful sometimes, it can also send this wrong message. Joseph seems to tell us that it took him years of searching, years of pondering, years of thinking before the vision came. Quote, at the age of 12 years, my mind became seriously impressed with regard to the all-important concern for the welfare of my immortal soul, is what he says. I pondered many things concerning the situation. Now, that's instructive to me because it shows me that sometimes answers don't come. They don't come for me right away. They might not come for you right away. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they take years. And it apparently took Joseph years here. It's also instructive because what 12-year-old says, I was concerned with the all-important welfare of my soul? You guys don't want to know what I was concerned about when I was 12 years old. It definitely wasn't that, to show the greatness of Joseph Smith's young soul as a whole. And as I mentioned again, he's also very concerned over his sins. He says, quote, I became convicted of my sins. I felt to mourn for my sins. The first thing he reports the Lord saying to him is, Joseph, my son, thy sins are forgiven thee. What a wonderful message, that one of the first messages of this dispensation to a young Joseph was that God forgives sins. And I bear my witness that he does. Also in the first vision, perhaps only one being is mentioned. Joseph says, and I'll talk about this and touch on it, a pillar of fire or light above the brightness of the sun at noonday came down from above and rested upon me, and I was filled with the Spirit of God. And the Lord opened the heavens unto me, and I saw the Lord. Now, it depends on Joseph's purpose here, on why he's not using this as a theological discourse on the Trinity, by the way, or the separate nature of the Father and the Son. He's simply saying that the Lord opened the heavens. He saw God, and that he spoke with God as a whole. Some people have even tried to say he is saying two beings there. The Lord opened the heavens, and I saw the Lord. It's hard to say. Some critics have tried to make mileage of that. In every other account, Joseph is very consistent that there are two beings. And as I'll talk about a little bit later, those two beings did not appear at the same time. I do think it is consistent that one being appeared to him first. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk first about the 1835 account. The 1835 account was given to a man named Robert Matthews, who fancied himself kind of like a Jewish prophet. He turns out to be a little bit more of a shady character than that, perhaps even wanted for murder. And after Joseph has him stay the night in his house, he finds out some details about him and then asks him to leave. So it's a little bit sketchy in our history, but from it we get a great first vision account as Joseph tells Robert Matthews about Joseph's own visions as a whole. In this one, he's going to emphasize some things, particularly the adversarial attack and some post details. He gives a good postscript from it. So let's talk about a few of them. In this one, Joseph gives us the most vivid description about the attack that happens to him. He hears, as he's calling, he hears a noise behind him. He says, I made a fruitless attempt to pray. My tongue seemed swollen in my mouth so that I could not utter. I heard a noise behind me like a person walking towards me. Strove again to pray, but could not. The noise of walking seemed to draw near. I sprung up on my feet. Some of you might remember this earliest church history video that shows this. They're drawing on this 1835 account where they're getting these details. Now, I mentioned this that's interesting, and one of the things I study is how we use art, and I'll talk about this as I show my own painting. We typically show the Father and the Son standing side by side, coming out of the pillar of light together. But that's actually not what the accounts say happened. Multiple accounts suggest that one being appeared to Joseph Smith, and then another being appeared. In the 1835 account, he says, a personage appeared in the midst of this pillar of flame, which was spread all around. By the way, did you catch in the 1832 account that he first wrote, I saw a pillar of fire, then crossed it out and wrote light? Back to this, spread all around, and yet nothing consumed. Another personage soon appeared like the first. He said to me, thy sins are forgiven thee. Really fascinating. And by the way, that's supported by at least two of the other secondary accounts. In 1843, David Nye White wrote, quote, directly I saw a light, and then a glorious personage in the light, and then another personage. To Alexander Nybar, who wrote this down, Nybar said that when he sees the being that appeared to him, after a while, another soon came to the side of the first. That's interesting to consider Joseph speaking to one being, and then after a while, or shortly thereafter, another being appeared. He also leaves this wonderful postscript in the 1835 account. He says, and I saw many angels in this vision. Wouldn't it be wonderful that this vision is probably greater than we suppose, of the Father and the Son, as though that's not great enough. There was apparently a concourse of angels. Imagine that in your mind as well. And we're starting to see that in some art being produced today. All right, the 1838 account is probably the account that you know best. The reason why is because this account is what is published in the official history of the church. It's in church newspapers. And then it gets picked up by Franklin D. Richards when he's a mission president over in England and put into this little pamphlet called the Pearl of Great Price. The Pearl of Great Price will soon become very popular over here in America as well with the church. And in 1880, it will be canonized, which is a big deal because that gives the average member of the church access to a printed version of the first vision for the first time. Then it starts to become cited and quoted and more well-known as a whole. Because of that, the 1838 account, it being in the Pearl of Great Price, it's the one that we know the best. Well, what's unique about it? Well, first of all, remember, this is the official history of the church. It gives us the most details about the rise of the church and in the context of the church. It gives us the most details about what happened before the vision and what happened after the vision. As I already mentioned, it probably has the most persecution details as well, because in 1838, the church is suffering from a lot of persecution. We get details like Joseph attending before all the meetings and the conflict that was going on in his mind. We get some wonderful details after, like that Joseph was lying on his back and that he had no strength. The discussion with his mother, that Presbyterianism is not true. The condemnation from one of the local Methodist preachers who tells him with great contempt that it's all of the devil. You get these wonderful, wonderful details in the 1838 account. The 1842 account was written by Joseph Smith to a newspaper man when we got to Illinois. So when the church starts to set up in Nauvoo, there's a newspaper man who writes a newspaper up in Chicago called the Chicago Democrat. His name's John Wentworth, and he wants to know just who are these Mormons that have come into Illinois. So Joseph writes him a letter giving a sketch of the rise of the church, and in it he includes a first vision account. The thing that's interesting about the context of the 42 account is it's actually written to a non-Latter-day Saint audience. So therefore it's a little bit more generic and follows some basic things that the 32, 35, and 38 account touch on as a whole. There's also 5 secondary accounts. By secondary accounts, these are people who heard Joseph Smith relate the vision and wrote it down. The 5 people who produced these are Orson Pratt, Orson Hyde, Levi Richards, David Nye White, and Alexander Nybar. And all of them have some wonderful details in them. Orson Pratt's account will actually be the earliest published account of the first vision. He gives some great details. It's obvious he's heard Joseph talk about it. To what extent Joseph reviews Pratt's account, it's unknown. But one of the things that Pratt talks about that I love is this idea of fire. Pratt says that Joseph thought that the entire grove was going to be consumed in flames and that this fire or light envelops him and wraps around him. Some beautiful details there. Orson Hyde publishes his in German and translated into English. He gives some details about the adversarial attack. Not only did Joseph's mouth swell up and he hear a noise, but also Hyde says that the adversary tried to put improper ideas into Joseph's mind to thwart him from obtaining his objective. I love this detail from Levi Richards that I'll talk about in an upcoming video about the doctrinal first vision. Levi Richards says that Joseph was told by God that the everlasting covenant had been broken, an important theological idea. David Nye White gives us this wonderful express permission, like, what church should I join specifically? Alexander Nybar puts it in revivalist language, or maybe Joseph tells it in revivalist language. He wanted to get religion. He wanted to feel and shout like the rest, but he could feel nothing. You can almost see the revivalist. And it's interesting, Joseph's like, all these other people are having these spiritual experiences. Why am I not? And really interesting insight. He also gives some details about what the Savior looked like. And he talks about the fire resting on him as well. So some wonderful details. Now, I would encourage you, go to the Joseph Smith Papers website. If you're like, where did Anthony Sweat find these sources? They are so available, perhaps more so than ever in the history of the church. Again, so grateful for the church history department, scholars at the Joseph Smith Papers. If you just go to the Joseph Smith Papers website, right on the front page, you'll see primary accounts of the first vision, a link. Click on it, and you can read these 9 original sources of where we get our understanding of the first vision. Just wonderful, wonderful things to read. I'd highly recommend you do that as you supplement your reading from the 1838 Pearl of Great Price account as well. Now, I want to end this video by showing you this painting. As I may have mentioned before, I am also a practicing artist. My bachelor's degree is in fine art, in painting and drawing. I went on to get a PhD in education, applied to religious education, but I still use art for religious education. One of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to take these 9 accounts of the first vision and try to put them in a depiction of the first vision that is a little different than maybe we sometimes see. So here you're seeing my account of the first vision. If I could just talk to you and show you where I'm getting this from. Ask yourself, what account is he drawing this from? So as you can see, I placed the grove early in the spring, likely before the trees had shot forth. It would have been more bare like that, early spring in upstate New York. You can see in the bottom left a slight dark shadow behind Joseph being pushed away by the fire. And in it, you see a picture of the adversary. We don't often show the adversary in the first vision, being pushed away by the vision itself. I chose to depict him a little nod to Karl Bloch there in the casting out of Satan from his painting. I chose to show Satan without clothes, almost like he has no glory. He's not clothed upon. You can also see there that I chose to depict not soft white light, but more a pillar of flame, more Old Testament coming down. I love that idea of a pillar of fire or light. And then using the Hyde account or the Pratt account, it envelops Joseph. You see it wrapping around him. You understand why Joseph might have been a little afraid. How would you feel to see a pillar of fire coming out of heaven towards you? Then you'll see also that the Father and the Son are not next to each other. I painted this deliberately. By the way, we often depict the Son to the right of the Father. That's a good symbol, and it's a good thing to use because Jesus standing on the right hand of God. A lot of our early first vision art depicts it that way, but none of the accounts say that that's how it happened, by the way. That's just a symbol we've adopted. Here I've taken a little different route. I almost picture the figure behind Jesus, or behind Joseph, is God the Father. And he has talked to Joseph and spent some time, and now after a while, he is now introducing the Son who is making his appearance. And if you look closely on the hands of the Son, you'll see some references to the crucifixion. I put the nimbus or the halo behind them so that they, to give glory. That's why that symbol's there, or to give honor to them. Now behind them, you'll also see a concourse of angels, male and female, of all skin colors, representing all nationalities of people, showing that the effects of the first vision, those who are exalted in heaven, they're all of God's children. It's for all of us. In the bottom right-hand corner, just one little detail, the axe struck there. That's from the Wentworth letter account, the 1842 account. I put that there because Joseph said he went to where he left his axe from working. This was a deliberate spot, a deliberate place where I think Joseph felt comfortable to offer up his desires of his heart unto God. Well, that is, I hope you enjoyed this image. I enjoyed creating it. And I hope you enjoyed learning about these 9 accounts of the first vision, why they matter and where they come from. I'm so grateful that we have these sources. I'm grateful that they're available to us. I'm grateful that they help us understand this important vision that redeemed a young man, forgave his sins, taught him about which church he should join, about a future work that God would do, and many other things. And I close with my own personal testimony that God did appear to the boy Joseph and his son Jesus Christ also, launching Joseph on a path to prophethood and inaugurating the wonderful work of the restoration and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.